Ahsoka, Balance of Truth, Book 1, Chapter 12. Chalmun's spaceport cantina was packed as usual with patrons from across the galaxy, looking to operate or enjoy life in areas not as frequently in the crosshairs of the Empire. The drinks were strong, too intense for some, and the music was fashionable and dependable by Figure and Dan and the modal nodes, as they were by all rights the house band. Brokering, dealings, both legitimate and non, courtships, grandstanding, camaraderie, and bounty hunting assemblage dotted every seat, booth, and open space within its walls. Kawani made for the greasy booth containing a male human and Atals of unknown gender. Dak Ralter? It's been ages, she said upon seating herself. Who's your friend? She asked, swiveling her gaze from the young, unkempt man to his peculiar acquaintance. Muftak, and I'm just the middleman in this arrangement, the human male said behind a tangle of long hair and through a chest length beard of matted black. You're looking at a pilot in training, he continued with far more pomp than either would have liked. Well, that's a change I should have been made aware of. Prior, don't you agree, Muftak? Kawani said defiantly, watching as the Tull's furry head bobbed and swayed, revealing no sentiment, its oral protrusion dilating and relaxing. You realize that Benzurden surrounding your face will have to be shaved to accommodate said training, right? She continued with a heavy dose of sarcasm, returning to face the young man again. A deal's a deal, Kawani. Why would you care where the shipment goes, or for that matter, where the credits come from? Dak insisted, shifting briefly under his robes, reflexively combing through his facial hair with dirty fingers. Besides, does he look dangerous to you? As a matter of fact, yes, she replied immediately, eyeing the Tulls' strange facial features, his eyes, all four of them in particular. But I am inclined to agree with you that it doesn't matter one bit in the long run, she smiled wryly. Tired of working for Draven, then? Isn't everyone? Dak returned, rolling his eyes toward the cantina's ceiling. The truth is, he's got a line on a cargo headed to Ordo Plutonia, he continued with a hand extended toward the white matted fur of the individual seated next to him, and needs whatever ash you can deliver to barter for what he says is vital to the release of his family, or something along those lines. Translation is somewhat limited, Dak revealed, getting them back on track, and the affirmative headshake by the tallest confirmed. Well, if the credits are suitable, you can have the remainder of my load, 13 crates, she returned. Credits will be limited, but you will receive all we can supply you, Dak shot back quickly. Dak, I've been too charitable recently and can't afford to be too generous. Her haggling skills were coming to the forefront. Annie, what you have is what you'll get, meaning we, and just about everyone else in here, know you're not returning to Malachor anytime soon, Dak pointed out. Kawani was not used to being on the defensive so soon into negotiations, but downplayed it as much as possible for the sake of the deal being consummated. I have no intention of returning to that backwater, ever. But that is beside the point. What are we talking about by way of credits? It better not be any lower than 50,000, she began standing mid-speech. We can muster 55,000, Annie. Sit down, he said as she followed her intention. Dak, you know what it takes to process this. Refinement alone is worth that on that many crates. She was losing her patience. It was quickly entertaining the idea of leaving. 65, Annie, and that taps us out, Dak returned. 10 for the trouble it takes to risk my ass operating under constant Imperial watch. Kawani was truly riled up. Everyone knows you enjoy the hell out of counterfeiting your ship to fill your needs. It's a game to you, Dak played his ace. She thought about that last comment, laughing in her mind, yet strictly appearing non-placated. Yes, she loved the game of becoming something else in the eyes of the transceiving community, and played her part with expertise. Still, the events of the last 24 hours had opened her eyes to the vulnerability of being such a player in the game. 64, Dak, keep 10, she concluded. His face showed surprise, and his partner emitted a tear in his upper left eye. Kawani, guessing as she was, conveyed happiness, her minimal knowledge of Tal shining through with ignorant bliss. Having concluded business, Kawani returned her datapad to her pocket, satisfied with the completed transaction. She commanded R3 to fulfill their end. A pilot, though? She circled back to the subtopic, leaning forward slightly with her elbow on the greasy table. First Gar, now you? This wouldn't have anything to do with the blonde from Pabu, would it? Kawani didn't even try to suppress her sarcastic smile. A loud crash from a table across the room saved Dak from the awkwardness of having to answer the question without thinking his response through. The illicit cursing and huttees from several patrons involved informing everyone remaining that things could escalate as they often did. Kawani only rolled her eyes skyward. I'll save you from answering that particular question, Dak, if you have something useful to trade, she continued, although the smile hadn't gone anywhere. We've been seeing heavy Imperial mobilization recently. Do you have any idea what's going on? She was genuinely curious, putting her feet up on the booth seat, settling in for some intel she could actively use. Rumors out of the ring saying there is highly classified activity in this sector, specifically deep space outside of the Anoat system. That all traffic into and out of that entire system is limited to the imps exclusively, Dak revealed, inching closer to Kawani and lowering his voice. Heavies go in, lighten the billy coming out, if you catch my meaning. Dak, we've known that for some time, at least generally guessed. Anything newer, because this is the same intel we've been trading since Kalok? Kawani said questioningly, inflicting a very uninspired sigh at the information. Well, that activity is now beginning in the Model sector, Dak said in a barely audible whisper after confirming with a severe glance sideways that he wouldn't be overheard. Now that is something, Dak, although a bit vague, Kawani answered with astonishment. A thought quickly took form. Any word from Saw? She continued in a hushed tone after a sidelong glance of her own. And do we know what the imps are moving? Kawani couldn't avoid the question that may have everything or nothing to do with her rare cargo. None, actually, which is way off base for him, Dak said dejectedly. That may be of more value than what we know they are doing on Jeddah to begin with, she said with a thoughtful look at Muftak, whom she couldn't read whatsoever. The Model sector. There is nothing of note there, at least to my knowledge, are you sure? Dak looked blankly back at her momentarily, but decided against lacing into sarcasm. Massive amounts of materials are being staged through Sullust via the Bakura Trace and Ovice Reach. The defensive buildup at Sullust is unprecedented, with committed fleets, defensive orbital rings, and the list goes on. Kawani swung her gaze back to Dak with extreme confusion painted all over it. If the materials are being staged at Stellus from both trade routes, where are they going? And what kind of materials? She asked. The short answer is everything, Annie. Many of the manifests we've gotten our hands on are almost verbatim to those traced to Geonosis and Sentinel years ago. As far as the destination, full military transport loads are departing toward a new route, something called the Sanctuary Pipeline. He finished in as hushed whisper as he could muster, his eyes dodging around the room to ensure he wasn't overheard. I need to get my hands on the specifics of that route, Dak. She gazed down at the greasy table, wondering how to convey this message to command. I will be in touch. Tell your friend not to ash himself into extinction. I hope it's worth it, she finished. For him, anything is. His people have been raided more times than even he can count, to be sold into slavery or for games, usually inspired by the Hutts, on both counts, Dak said with a hint of detest. For the galaxy to accept forms of cruelty and barbarism being more compliant than a dictating empire owes much to the general conscience, she added for no one's ears particularly. Shiki musmaka, kapoka pinglukup, Muftak mumbled, Dak nodding affirmatively. What did he say? Kawani asked, curious. Basically, we were promised peace, but we're returning to war, Dak translated, Kawani understanding the importance of the words. Don't I know it? Everyone knows it's coming. It's just a matter of where and when, she added for their benefit and pushed herself up to her feet. She turned back suddenly to face Dak. Congratulations, by the way, although I am certain piloting isn't a safer career choice for anyone these days. Kawani finished the statement and smiled at the young man. She isn't just some blonde, from Pabu. She has a name. Dak felt the timing was right to defend his own choice. Kawani embellished her returning smile far enough to push her cheeks into her vision, but decided against offering any further comment. either side nor congratulatory, choosing another route entirely. "Just stay safe, Dak. Just stay safe," she said hurriedly, meaning every word. His eyes bore the sorrow most felt as the dregs of reality inched them all closer to the brink they all feared. Kawani nodded a final time toward the alien Tals, whom she couldn't read whatsoever, then pushed herself from the table altogether, almost colliding with an inebriated Rhodian. A deft sidestep avoided any contact, but the encounter reminded her that her time was limited. The Bith band lead led his fellows into another stirring melody, her intention set to returning to the ship and waiting for Ahsoka's signal. It was the timing of her thought, and catching a swift glimpse out of the corner of her eye of a swirling hollow image of the Togruta that made her stop in her tracks. A robed individual was preferring a hollow chip with Ahsoka's image to a Weequay, who snatched it and stuffed it into a pocket at his belt in one swift move. She quickly etched his image into her memory and glanced at the door to avoid suspicion. Her first thought was that if Ahsoka's capture was the intention, he's going to need a whole lot of help. The horrific memory of the last time she was threatening taking hold. The Weequay headed to and out of the door with determination. Kawani, assigning herself the covert operation of obtaining more information, slipped out shortly after him. Ahsoka gently, slowly, geared the bike from the ramp through the hangar bay entrance and into the street. The difference between this place and their last was the diminished number of people present, the smaller, low-profile dwellings, knowing full well most establishments on Tatooine were built underground to avoid the beating suns and the absence of stench. The heat was incredible, however, although lacking the humidity found on Narshada. If she was moving, however, she didn't care one bit. Easing the bike through the wide street, she kept the rope tight, concealing her identity as much as possible. Aching to clear the city itself and hit the open ground where she could unleash the full speed of the bike, she did her best to steer clear of any mass gatherings, although they were few and far between in the midday sun. Seeing the final dwelling down what she understood to be Paradise Road, she opened the throttle and shot out of the city at full speed, understanding the thrill of racing the vehicles. The adrenaline rush was exactly what Ahsoka needed now to realign her sense of self to the ever-flowing force and let her relax overall. The wind whipping at her face, she was lost to the heat as she headed south out of Mos Eisley and into the sprawling hills and valleys of the southern wastes. The terrain, she thought, was breathtaking. The changing angle of the suns and the resulting shadows they caused play the color wheel, giving the impression that nothing had an original hue, that everything was awash in some shade or form of red, orange, and yellow. If not for the ever-present blue sky as a backdrop, they could easily hypnotize her senses into dizziness. Where the rocky escarpments and gorges were interrupted by open desert, moisture evaporators could be seen dotting the horizon. Butte, arches, and mesas could be seen far and wide, splashing everything with that same vibrant color. While navigating the bike through a dusty gorge, Ahsoka emerged to a vast expanse and could sense herself moving away from Obi-Wan. She immediately turned back and headed northwest, picking paths between valleys not to strand herself on so much elevated rockiness. Ahsoka passed into and through what she would understand were the valley straits of the Jundland Wastes. Beautiful as the setting suns reflected those same reds, oranges, and yellows in their full array and color wheels, but completely inhospitable. She slowed the bike to effectively enter a slender canyon, without careening into wayward stone, and immediately began a delicate incline. Dangerously close to overshooting her sense coordinates and right off a cliff, she was surprised to see how high in elevation she was. To her left, Ahsoka saw a very homely dwelling. She parked the bike and slowly treaded toward the door. Upon reaching it, she could see a very sparse living space, a small fire in its place and not much else. "Miss Tano, it is a pleasure to see a familiar and friendly face, but even from behind." She heard the words and spun into an embrace with her old master, forcing him to drop the bucket of water he had been carrying. Kawani had followed the Weequay up one street, down 3 alleys, and into the back lot of a Starship parts dealer, far enough away to not attract far away not to attract unwanted attention. She was determined to see where this man was heading, and for what purpose, as he was carrying a holochip of Ahsoka. He had slowed down and settled on an overturned crate as he retrieved the holochip and sat down to inspect the image. In all her glory, Ahsoka's head spun slowly counterclockwise from the emitter chip in his hand, lines of text appearing at either side and underneath that Kawani was too far away to read. Then her comlink chimed too loudly, she thought, and Dak was at the other end. Annie, I just received word that Jeddah City's been destroyed. We believe Saw was either involved or a casualty, as neither he nor his crew are responding, he crackled in. What? By what? Why? Kawani attempted to ask as her emotions took hold. We don't know. There aren't any details. A mid-rim hauler pilot just said it was destroyed. He crackled in again. All right, I appreciate it, Dak. Let me know if you have any other information, she said, wanting to keep things as short as possible. Was Jeddah destroyed? For what purpose? There was nothing there but what the Empire was already confiscating. Here and now, Annie, she said to herself. She pulled herself back around the corner to receive the communication, and peeked afterward to continue her efforts with the Weekoi. He was gone. Looking for someone? A voice behind her questioned. Nope, not gone, moved, she thought to herself. Gracious young one, do you realize what a commodity is that lay in a puddle at your feet? Obi-Wan said after letting go of his embrace, Ahsoka looking down to take his meaning. My apologies, Master. I can get you more, Ahsoka admonished herself. No need, no need. Please come in. We have much to discuss and little time. Obi-Wan ushered her forth through the door. It was just as sparsely furnished as she had thought. Want for nothing, is that right, Master? She said. I do not need more than I want. Which I currently have, he replied. Master, Ahsoka started. First, I need to tell you something, Obi-Wan cut her off. I wish to apologize for my actions 24 years ago. I would also do the same for the Council, but Yoda and I remain the only ones. I am sure he will likely wish to share the same sentiment. Master, it's not Ahsoka began again. But it is, young lady. Even now, you embody all that we sought to be, Ahsoka. Your courage, integrity, honesty, intuition, vibrance, fortitude, and resilience have always served you well, even when we did not. He looked down for a moment. Had the Council listened to you, there is no telling what may have changed. Maybe nothing, but it was the lessons we thought we were teaching that we hadn't learned ourselves. He brought his gaze back up to look into her eyes. The roles are quite reversed, I must say, and have been ever since you walked away from the temple. Ahsoka gave that a minute to register. Master, apologies are gracious, but you don't need to lecture me on the misgivings of the Council, or even the Jedi in general. Adhering to a code turned the Jedi themselves into just another Senate for debate and lecture. That wasn't anyone's call to make. The Jedi served the Republic, and in that they chose poorly. Had the Jedi served the Force alone, there wouldn't have been the need for war at all. There wouldn't have been any need for the Council itself either, and that is where humility was lost. Humility and respect for the Force, Master Kenobi. It felt good for her to say. Sitting down, Obi-Wan's gaze ventured out a mud-caked opening Ahsoka took for a window, and he didn't say anything for a while. I do not argue with that assessment, Ahsoka. You are right, he said firmly. Master, it has been my stance for over 20 years. It isn't about being right or wrong, good or bad, righteous or evil. It's about finding the balance within the Force itself. Something like that cannot be guided, influenced, or judged, she said, her tone shifting to reflect a sudden sadness. You could not have saved him, Ahsoka. No one could, not even himself, Obi-Wan said quickly, understanding her dejection as he turned to face her again, placing an open palm over his knee for support. I pleaded with him on Mustafar, Ahsoka, but his mind was already made up. Even Padme had betrayed him. He took a deep breath. If this is about Padme, I already know, she cut in. It's about more than Padme, Ahsoka. It's about perspective. It's about legacy and a prophecy fulfilled, Obi-Wan stated. You, Anakin, and I have a unique perspective on many things. He let the words trail off into the thoughts that gave them birth, and fell silent for a long moment. Exhaling dramatically, he turned his gaze again to the wall opening, the setting suns bathing the room in an orange glow. "What do you remember of the Chrylithium system, Ahsoka?" Ahsoka had not expected the question whatsoever, appreciative that his attention was focused away from her. She straightened her contorted features back into a semblance of normality, giving her mind a moment to compose an answer. Images that had drifted in and out of dream, dancing forever within her subconscious. She remembered seasonal changes within the span of footsteps, choices made that she couldn't control. She remembered limitless power and the engulfing tide of satisfying greed, a forced channel for unbearable anger and hatred. Still, she remembered the blinding rays of light that had obliterated her insatiable thirst for destruction and annihilation, a nurturing peace that had washed away the hunger for power, leaving her the vessel of its blessing. Obi-Wan slowly swung his gaze from the window to ensure she had heard the question. Ahsoka crossed her arms before her chest and walked closer to the window, narrowing her eyes as she passed him by. She stared from the orange, dried mud frame out toward the beauty of the day's final light. "Master, I remember everything," she said as she turned her head over her shoulder. "I thought as much, although I do not think they intended that we depart with memory intact. I only asked because I understood the trials we had witnessed had led me to believe in the Chosen One wholly, whereas before I had doubts. Anakin made up his mind and chose his path. The light still resides within him, but it's a conflict I don't think he even knows how to overcome," Obi-Wan stated, omitting his proper understanding. "Master, you mentioned legacy," Ahsoka said, dismissing the thought of Anakin again as she turned to face him. "Yes, his children, Luke and Leia," Obi-Wan said, not sensing surprise of any sort from her. "I have spent some amount of time with Leia, Master. She has become quite a force in her own right. Bail tried to contain his ruse, but relented some time ago. She is strong in the Force, solid," Ahsoka admitted. "What of Luke?" "He has been my charge for the last 20 years, Obi-Wan stated. "What, here?" Ahsoka was surprised. "Why here?" "Can you think of no place better?" Obi-Wan almost laughed. "This is the last place Anakin would look, even if he knew of his existence. Do you know what this place holds for him, Ahsoka?" "Only through pieces of conversation from years past," Ahsoka said. "Ahsoka, this is his home, or was his home. The anger in him was ignited through fear. My master took him in, compelled to follow his instincts that Anakin was the chosen one. He was chosen, but only for his part in what would become the legacy. It all started with losing his mother. It happened not far from where you now stand, Ahsoka, which is exactly why he will not return here. His son, Luke, is close." Obi-Wan finished, staring out the window again. Ahsoka thought on that for a few minutes, asserting that it made sense and why Obi-Wan has been difficult, if not impossible, to sense. He had closed himself off from the Force to protect the boy. But then, how were you able to train him, having been cut off, Master? She asked, matter of fact, assuming that Luke was just as Force-sensitive as Leia. "I have not trained him, Ahsoka," Obi-Wan admitted after a long moment. She ran through the spectrum of emotions at that statement. Anger welled instantly, replaced by confusion and sadness. Obi-Wan watched and patiently waited as he could see her sincerely struggling with the fact. Ahsoka was beginning to piece things together to make her mind see the whole. Her point of view clouded, knowing Anakin as intimately as she did, and she struggled to remove her opinion from her thought process. "I understand to a point, Master, but leaving so much to fate can have severe consequences. Unless, of course, he has no sense of the Force in him," she muttered, looking at the floor. "Ahsoka, I have been privy to many of the most powerful Force-sensitive beings this galaxy has ever seen. None of them compared to what I've sensed surrounding Luke, including his father. However, he doesn't know of it," Obi-Wan said. "All the more reason for my confusion to return then, Master. Why wouldn't you at least reach out to him to guide him in some regard?" her anger returned. His mind would reel at being exposed to so much truth all at once if he chose to look inward. Master, I feel it is irresponsible to leave him so exposed, Ahsoka said, rising to her feet. You fated him to die at the hands of those looking to take from him that which he doesn't even know he possesses, she finished. Ahsoka, please sit. Do you not think I have thought of that? Does all the gray that graces my head and beard count for nothing? Think, Ahsoka. You and I had the galaxy at our feet, albeit through arrogance, but an arrogance bred from the knowledge of tens of thousands of Jedi with a foothold or presence on every planet, consigning children away from families they would never know to follow a doctrine of our creation to, in turn, enforce or mediate our measures of peace, while adding to our knowledge base. Any future the Jedi may have ultimately lie with these siblings. We cannot doom that future before it even shows itself by continuing dogma. Obi-Wan was almost scolding. Ahsoka paced back and forth to the window with her arms crossed in front of her. She knew he was right. That Force-sensitive beings across the galaxy went untrained for many reasons was nothing new to her. She thought of Thebeska and her inability to guide young Hidala, or see that someone else could. Her mind was racing as guilt was beginning to overwhelm her. Why would the Fardi child be any different than the son of Anakin? But even Obi-Wan was sensing something different in the two. Luke precisely. Master, I do understand. To a degree. I've had to make similar decisions in the past. She paused for a long moment, staring out of the setting suns. Without turning to Obi-Wan, she finished, It's the importance you've rightly placed in Luke's hands to fulfill a legacy he doesn't even know he's a part of that troubles me.